Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Paul Danchek, the COO of the California Counties Foundation, more commonly referred to as the CSAC Foundation. Today's webinar is part of our series to provide resources to counties around grants. And today's topic is on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility and its influence on grant funding. We're super excited to have two folks from the White House joining us, which Veronica will introduce in a few seconds. Dr. Natasha DeJarnett and Ms. Kylie Patterson, thanks for joining us on today's call. The CSAC Grants Initiative was created about 2 years ago to be able to support counties where you are in applying for grants, recognizing the way we apply for grants has shifted in recent years. We have both free services and premium services. This is part of our free services that to help inform counties on different trends that we're experiencing and that we're noticing, and to be able to better prepare you as you continue to move forward on the grants journey. We're proud to be able to work with the Ferguson Group, with Chrissy Moore, Heidi Schott, and Kristen Long, and their team to be able to provide services both in this capacity in our free services with the webinars and office hours, and also on our tier services as well. On the CSAC team, Veronica Smith is leading the charge as our Programs and Grants Director for CGI, and you'll hear more from her in a second. Today, we're experiencing a couple of technical glitches, so appreciate you sticking with us as we continue to work it out on the back end. We're excited for the presentations. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Please hold your questions until the end, so the panelists will give their presentations. We'll pause, record, allow questions and dialogue to take place, and then unpause it at the end with a couple of wrap-up notes. If you're running into any technical support, just reach out to us and you can put it into the chat, and we'll see if we can get you back on track. The session is being recorded. You saw that as you came in today, and we'll hit that pause during the Q&A session. So please hold your questions until that time. For additional resources, we have a special report on DEIA. It's available on the CSAC member portal. And if you're having problems finding it, just reach out to either Veronica or me. And at the end, we have a survey, and your feedback is always helpful as we continue to build out this portfolio of resources for you all within this space. Veronica, will you welcome our guests?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Paul, for that intro, and welcome everyone who is on the webinar right now, and welcome to everyone who will watch this after the fact. We appreciate you all for joining us. And this morning, we are joined by two very special guests from the White House Council on Environmental Quality and the White House Domestic Policy Council. And up first, we have Kylie Patterson, who serves as the Deputy Assistant to the President for Racial Justice and Equity on the White House Domestic Policy Council. In this role, she manages a team of policy experts focused on racial and economic justice, disability policy, Native affairs, equality, and opportunity, including LGBTQ rights, democracy and voting rights, and inclusive federal procurement. Previously, she served as the Chief Opportunity and Inclusion Officer for CHIPS for America at the Department of Commerce, a $50 billion investment to strengthen and revitalize United States manufacturing, innovation, and technological leadership. And after Kylie Patterson, we will have Dr. Natasha DeJarnett, who is the Deputy Director for Environmental Justice, Data, and Evaluation at the White House Council on Environmental Quality, helping to advance the Biden-Harris administration's bold and historic commitment to leverage the force of the full federal government in advancing environmental justice. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to our first speaker, Kylie Patterson.
Well, hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I'm happy to join you today for the California State Association of Counties webinar, exploring how the federal government's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion and environmental justice might impact grant opportunities. I first want to say thank you, and thanks to the tireless advocacy of so many of you and your communities, the federal government has the charge to advance equity for all. including for communities that have long been underserved, and address systemic racism in our nation's policies and programs. You know, when mothers who are Black and Native American, as well as mothers living in rural communities, have to worry about whether they will survive during and after childbirth, we have more work to do to ensure health equity. When a Latino family has to take down their family photos before putting their home up for sale to ensure the property isn't devalued, we have more work to do to root out housing discrimination. When Native communities, U.S. territories, and communities impacted by poverty are on the front lines of our climate crisis, but face a lack of investments after natural disasters, we have more work to do to advance environmental justice. Advancing equity means putting these real stories at the heart of the federal government's work, following the data and evidence to identify ongoing injustices, and partnering with communities to tackle the barriers that American families still face. Since day one, the Biden-Harris administration has championed an ambitious equity and racial justice agenda to ensure the full and fair participation of all communities in American life. Since day one, we recognize the reality that numerous programs in the federal government have historically underserved particular communities, including rural communities, communities of color, tribal communities, LGBTQI+ individuals, religious minorities, people with disabilities, women and girls, and communities impacted by persistent poverty. Research has demonstrated time and time again that addressing these opportunity gaps will drive stronger economic growth for all Americans. In fact, research from the 12th Federal Reserve's 12th District finds that the gaps in opportunity for women and people of color cost the U.S. $2.6 trillion in foregone GDP in 2019 alone. If these gaps were closed, it's estimated that economic output would increase by an additional $3.1 trillion in 2029. And so this is why Biden-Harris administration has issued 2 historic executive orders and is driving the equitable implementation of the president's landmark Investing in America agenda and other key legislation. We are feds, and we love always mentioning the numbers and the letters. So Executive Order 13985, which is advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government, and Executive Order 14091, further advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. Now, I'm very thankful to be on this call today with Dr. Desjarnette, who will actually talk about yet another executive order, but I'm going to lift these 2 up for now. So, to be clear, we are focused on increasing economic and social mobility and making real the promise of America for everyone. And now, more than ever, it is critical we reject the narrow, cramped view of America, zero-sum. We all do better when we all do better. It is my utmost honor to say that all cabinet-level agencies within the federal government, 23 large agencies have equity action plans, and they have over 100 community-informed strategies and actions that they're implementing to address systemic barriers. And this includes grant programs. Agencies are taking action to promote fairness in the housing market, address gender-based workforce discrimination, ensure health equity, and expand contracting opportunities for veterans, safe and accessible transportation for people with disabilities, and so forth. So I recognize that you all joined today's call because you want something that's actionable. And so I'm going to share a simple acronym with you as you think about this work. And so what we know is that we've called on our federal agencies to prioritize equity. And as a result, many of them are including in their notices of funding opportunity a question around how is your program, your project, this opportunity going to impact equity. And I've talked to a number who are confused or concerned about how can I make the case? What is necessary? What are you really looking for? And I'm going to give you this acronym, and it's DARE. Now, you all might be thinking, wait a minute, DARE, I remember that from middle school, right? Avoid drugs. And you're right, we'll do that. This is a different acronym. And this acronym is D starts with data. So as you're thinking about what the federal government is looking for, we're looking for data. And that data will include a historical review of disparities in your area, current analysis of current disparities in your area, a plan to understand the impact of the investments or the interventions over time. And in particular, understanding how have those investments and interventions affected diverse communities. And of course, understanding community needs. And so all that falls under that D for data. Next is A, accountability. Sharing with us and indicating, is there a plan in place to evaluate the work? Is there some type of convening board, community-informed board that's making sure that, that the work is being held to an account and that there's an ongoing evaluation and adjustments being made to make sure that, again, equitable outcomes are being sought? R stands for resources. Now, what we know is, you may have heard the African proverb, when we run alone, we can run fast, but when we run together, we can run far. And I share that because when we talk about resources, we're really asking this question of course, do you have the financial and et cetera, but also do you have the partnerships in your community, across your county, to make sure that this will be successful. And last but not least is E, for executive sponsorship. Has the executive of your county demonstrated their commitment to this work via some type of letter or public statement, so forth. So I share with that some easy, I hope, considerations as you advance your work on the ground. We want to say thank you. We know truly that the work that we're doing here in the federal government really becomes real at the county and local level. So I want to say thank you on behalf of the Biden-Harris administration for all that you do, and I look forward to the Q&A. Now I'll pass it over to my colleague here in the White House for her remarks.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Kylie. I was taking notes as you were sharing, and I absolutely love what you shared about we all do better when we all do better. And thank you, Paul, for your help with the slides. We'll stay here for just a minute. I'm really excited to be here with you today. I'm really excited to share with you about version 1.0 of the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. I'm Dr. Natasha D. Darnett, Deputy Director for Environmental Justice Data and Evaluation at the White House Council on Environmental Quality. I want to acknowledge CEQ's Environmental Justice team, our nation's first ever Office of Environmental Justice, and the White House Council on Environmental Quality that's under the leadership of Dr. Jalon White Newsom, and of course, CEQ Chair Brenda Mallory. I also want to acknowledge our partners at the U.S. Digital Service that contributed extensively to the development of the screening tool. Version 1.0 of the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool is a key step in delivering on the administration's environmental justice commitments, as well as its Justice 40 goals. And before we step into the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, I'll share just a little bit of background, including some executive orders, as pointed out by Kylie. We can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So President Biden signed Executive Order 14008 on tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad during his first week in office. And this executive order charged the Council on Environmental Quality with creating a geospatial climate and economic justice screening tool and publishing interactive maps highlighting disadvantaged communities. Executive Order 14008 also created the Justice 40 Initiative. Next slide, please. So the Biden-Harris administration's Justice 40 Initiative seeks to deliver 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments to disadvantaged communities that are marginalized by underinvestment and overburdened by pollution. Next slide, please. So the categories of Justice 40 investment include climate change, clean energy and energy efficiency, clean transit, affordable and sustainable housing, remediation and reduction of legacy pollution, clean water and wastewater infrastructure, and training and workforce development. Next slide, please. So the Justice 40 Initiative is a series of changes by agencies. It's not a one-time investment and it's not a single pot of money. It applies to existing programs that are known as Justice 40 covered programs, as well as new programs that are directing resources to benefit disadvantaged communities. And those include examples in the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the American Rescue Plan. Next slide, please. And so this brings us to the CJIS. Version 1.0 of the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, or the CJIS, was launched on November 22nd, 2022. And federal agencies are using this tool to help identify disadvantaged communities who benefit from the Justice 40 initiative. Version 1.0 responds to a lot of feedback that we received in the beta version of the tool. In total, we had over 3,000 comments, emails, or survey responses that provided feedback on the beta version of the CJIS, much of which we were able to incorporate into version 1.0 of the tool. Next slide, please. So for the CJIS methodology, communities are considered disadvantaged if they're in census tracts that meet the threshold for at least one of the tool's categories of burden. In addition, communities are also considered disadvantaged if they're on the lands of federally recognized tribes. Next slide, please. So in the CJIS tool, the burdens are categorized according to areas that relate to both the Justice 40 areas of investment, as well as how President Biden referenced disadvantaged communities in Executive Order 14008. And that includes the categories of climate change, energy, transportation, housing, legacy pollution, water and wastewater, health, and workforce development. So a community is highlighted as disadvantaged on the CJIS map if it's in a census tract that is at or above the threshold for one or more of the burden indicators, and that tract is also at or above the associated threshold for the associated socioeconomic burden. So overall, there are a little over 27,000 census tracts that are identified as disadvantaged in version 1.0 of the CJIS. Here on this slide, I'll share an example of the methodology behind the climate change burden, as well as another one on the next slide. But I encourage you to view the CJIS website under our data and methodology page, so you can see the full methodology along with documentation of the data sets that are used for each burden category. So you can see them all summarized here and on the following slide. So for climate change, communities are identified as disadvantaged if they're in census tracts that are at or above the 90th percentile for expected building, agriculture, or population loss rate, or projected flood or wildfire risk, and are at or above the 65th percentile for low income. Next slide, please. And I'll also share an example from health. So for health, communities are identified as disadvantaged if they're in census tracts that are at or above the 90th percentile for asthma, diabetes, heart disease, or low life expectancy, and are also at or above the 65th percentile for low income. In addition, I'll also note that a census tract that is completely surrounded by disadvantaged communities and is at or above the 50th percentile for low income is also considered disadvantaged. Next slide, please. So I want to quickly share with you about the guidance that has been given to federal agencies on using the CJIS. As of October of last year, agencies are using the CJIS for any new covered investments that fall under the Justice 40 interim guidance. Many agencies have already taken actions such as issuing notice of funding opportunities, and as new covered investments are made or as new notice of funding opportunities are issued, agencies are to use the CJIS to geographically identify disadvantaged communities to the maximum extent permitted by law. The CJIS is now the primary tool used by agencies for such geographic identification. Next slide. And so how will you see this, or how are you likely to run into the tool? More than likely, you may encounter the tool when you are applying for grants. So if you go to grants.gov and click search grants, you will find many notice of funding opportunities and funding opportunity announcements that include the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. And as of just recently this week, a quick search showed that there are about 64 posted or open grant opportunities. So I'll share with you just a couple examples. All three of these examples have language pertaining to the CJIS along with the Justice 40 initiative. So one includes the Department of Interior's Water Smart Drought Response Program, Drought Resiliency Projects for fiscal year 2025. And this closes in October of 2025. There's also the Department of Energy's Solar Technologies Rapid Integration and Validation for Energy Systems, or STRIVES, and that closes in October of this year. And then there's also the EPA's Environmental and Climate Justice Community Change Grants Program, which closes in November of this year. Next slide, please. So the guidance and instructions provide directions to federal agencies on how to use the CGIS. These are publicly available and they're there on the Screening Tools website. We'll show you a preview of these in the demo in just a moment. And in the meantime, if you do have any questions, you're always welcome to email us at screeningtool, that's one word, _support@omb.eop.gov. Next slide, please. So I want to thank everyone for joining in this presentation today. We hope that you will get out the word about the President's historic climate environmental justice agenda. Also, we'd love for you to stay connected. So please subscribe to our EJ Connector newsletter by emailing ej@ceq.eop.gov. Or as always, you can capture the QR code that's shown here on this slide. And this newsletter has resources, information, and updates on environmental justice across the federal government. With that, we can move to the last slide and transition to a demo. And I will ask in advance for your patience as we go through this demo. And certainly thanks much to Kristen for your help and support here. And thank you also to Paul for your help with the slides. Awesome, thank you. So we are here on the CGIS website. We are here at screeningtool.geoplatform.gov. So if you type in the CGIS, this is precisely where you will land. This is the homepage for the CGIS. And so you can see there's a search bar that's right there near the middle of the screen. And in the search bar, you can type in a city, you can type in a county, you can type in a landmark. And all of that will navigate you to the area. Also, this is a special feature. You're not seeing this from my desktop. And because you're not seeing this from my desktop, you can also see that geolocation is available. Right beside that magnifying glass, there's geolocation available. So if you want to see exactly in the area where you're currently located, you can also utilize that feature as well. I also want to point out along the side, there are some shortcuts, one for the lower 48, then Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and other US territories. You're able to jump to those pretty easy by clicking on those buttons right there on the side. Thank you so much for scrolling. We can go to the next tab. Okay, and if you scroll down just a little, hey, this is great. Thank you. So I'd like to show you some disadvantaged areas and some areas that are not disadvantaged and how you will see them as you interact with the CGIS map. So if you click right beside the word Calipetra, and please forgive me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, we're right here in California. Yes, if you click there, that should work. Perfect. So you can see from the map immediately that this area is identified as disadvantaged because it has that darker shading. But also, if you look there on the side panel, it says, is this identified as disadvantaged? And it is identified as disadvantaged. So it says yes, and it's highlighted there in blue. And then if you scroll down just a little bit further on that side panel, you can see the reasons why. For each of the burden categories, where it exceeds the threshold, it's highlighted there in blue. So we can start with energy, sure. And so you can see that under the energy category, the energy cost exceeds the threshold. And then this area is also identified as low income. And so with that combination, this community is identified as disadvantaged, along with a number of other factors in health. I believe it is diabetes for this community, legacy pollution, as well as water and wastewater and workforce development. And you can click on any of those tabs and gather more information about the community. Thanks so much. Excellent. With the demo, we'll look at another community. We'll go to that third tab there. And if we can scroll down a little bit. All right, so you can see that there are some disadvantaged communities that appear kind of at the intersection of those two highways that are coming together. If you click somewhere near the Velarda grocery store or Smart and Final grocery store, I think that'll highlight the tract we're looking at. Perfect. Thank you. So here we are in Pasadena, California. The previous tract, I think, was in a little bit more of a rural area. This tract is much less rural, and this tract is also identified as disadvantaged. You can see that from the darker shading. Here in this area, you can also see the lighter shaded areas that are around it, so you can kind of see both scenarios here. And then we can also look on the side panel to see why this tract is identified as disadvantaged. So it's energy. This time it's actually the PM 2.5 in the air, as opposed to energy costs as it was in the previous tract that we looked at. And also that in association with the associated socioeconomic variable there for the energy category, low income are among the reasons. We can look at workforce development, as we haven't talked too much about this one. This category utilizes high school education as its associated socioeconomic factor. So linguistic isolation is higher in this community, and then high school education is lower in this community. So those are among the reasons why this particular tract is identified as disadvantaged. If you can click on any one of the not shaded tracts that is around this one, we'll just, we'll look at an area that's not identified as disadvantaged as well. Thanks. So here that's a perfect tract to look at. So you'll still have all of the information available, but you can see that it's not shaded. And then on the side panel where it says identified as disadvantaged, it says no, there's no blue highlight there. Perfect, thank you. But all of the same information is still there. There may be some thresholds that are exceeded, but because those thresholds are not exceeded along with the associated socioeconomic variables for this particular area, this area is not currently identified as disadvantaged. Thank you. There's another scenario that I'd like to show you before I share with you some of the resources of the CGIS. Thanks, this is perfect. So here we are, we're near Rancho Mirage, California, in Thousand Palms. Now, if you click right above Gerald Ford Drive on Agua Caliente, I think that will highlight the appropriate tract here. A little bit down, a little further down, and then one over. Yes, if you click right there, perfect. So what we find here is a tract that's identified as partially disadvantaged, and that is because the lands of federally recognized tribes cover 63% of this tract. So while you see below that none of the different burden categories are highlighted as disadvantaged, all lands of federally recognized tribes are identified as disadvantaged. So the portion of this tract that's occupied by federally recognized tribes, there is shown as partially disadvantaged. Thank you. So I'll share with you some of the resources of the tool, some other things that you're able to find on the website. So this is our About page. This is where you can find out more about the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. I think there are some really helpful resources on this particular page. We already have the link pulled up for the memorandum on using the CGIS for the Justice 40 initiative. So this is the guidance that is given to federal agencies on using the tool. It's helpful for us all to know this, though it is directed to federal agencies. But if you are seeking funding from federal agencies or looking to understand more about the tool and its intended use, this particular memorandum will be quite helpful to you. Also linked on that page are the instructions to federal agencies on using the CGIS. I find this document quite helpful and probably look at it a couple times a week, though obviously I spend a lot of my time on the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. But if you scroll to the second page, it has a really helpful table of contents that can point you right to the things that you might be interested in finding out more about the CGIS, including what is the Justice 40 initiative, how to use the CGIS to prioritize disadvantaged communities, etc. If we go to the next tab, I'm really excited that we were able to release a couple, let's call them graphic tutorials on using the CGIS. So if you just want to scroll through this document pretty quickly, we have screenshots of the tool and how to use the tool. So it makes it real life and what you can expect to see on the tool, very similar to the demo we just went through, with pictures and notes for each. Thank you. And then in this next tab, we have the same thing for this spreadsheet, because you can also download the data of the CGIS. And so what to expect as you go to download the CGIS spreadsheet and what you'll see when you download it. Thank you. So just two more things we wanted to point out for your attention. The methodology page I find to be quite helpful. It includes all of the different burden categories and the different indicators, along with the sources for those indicators. Tons of great information here, and then links out to other websites where you can get additional information on the data. And then that last tab that we have for your attention is the downloads. So as I mentioned, you can download the data of the CGIS, whether through Excel files. You can also download shape files of the maps. Another thing that's here that I always find extremely helpful is the technical support document. If you want to do a deeper dive to better understand the technical workings of the tool, definitely utilize the technical support document. I may look at that as much as I look at the instructions of the CGIS. The instructions are also linked here, so if you don't remember that they're on the About page, you can also download them from this page. But just really appreciative of your time, really appreciative of all of those who helped to make this presentation possible. And certainly during the question and answer portion, happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Natasha and Kylie, for those presentations this morning. For all on the webinar, we would like to encourage you to drop your questions into the chat that you may have for Dr. Natasha and Kylie. Additionally, if you weren't able to capture the QR code or contact information that they both left, we can also get that information to you after this webinar. And again, we truly appreciate you both for being on today. This is a very complicated topic that is continually changing, and it causes, some degree of confusion for some, when things come down from the federal level to the local level, things can sometimes get lost in translation, especially when it comes to grant funding, and especially when it comes to the guidelines, which seems to sometimes move as it relates to disadvantaged communities. And depending on where the qualification or classification is coming from, it can be even more complex. So we truly appreciate the download that you've given this morning.
Dr. DeJarnette and Ms. Patterson, very much appreciate you being with us today. I'm totally geeking out on this side of the house, looking at all the maps and saying, man, we could just continue to drill down in our communities to see where those hotspots are right now. That just adds to our knowledge base and helps us be more informed. So as we're continuing to work on grants or in other capacities, we're able to see it directly on how our communities continue to evolve and how they're impacted within our area. So thanks very much for your time today. I want to give a big shout out to Christy Moore with the Ferguson Group for making this all possible and working with the White House. Christy, would you like to say hello?
Yes, I'm off mute, I believe, but hello, everybody, and thank you. I extend the gratitude and appreciation from CSAC for you both joining us today. For those of you on the webinar and who are listening or might be listening later, I highly encourage you to take advantage of the tools and the resources provided by the White House, as well as the funding agencies that you're looking at grants for. We have seen tweaks, we have seen changes, we've seen these tools across the board update with new data, and this isn't like the census where it's 10 years, nothing against the census, but that data is typically refreshed on a static basis. This is very organic, and it does change as your communities change. So I highly encourage you to reach out, check out those resources. And if you have any questions, reach out to the program agencies themselves. We are available as a resource through office hours as well, to make sure that you're looking at the data in a way that enhances your grant applications and meets the goals of the administration. So thank you again, on behalf of CSAC and our team. It's been a pleasure hearing from you today.
Awesome. Thanks, Chrissy. This has been a three-part series over this year. So if you missed our earlier webinars, we have those recorded. If you're not able to find it on the CSAC site, just reach out to us. When you're down at the annual meeting, come see us. We'll have a booth there, and say hi to us. Chrissy will be there as well. Of course, Veronica will be there from our team. So pop in and say hi. We're here to be able to support you in the work that you're doing. Provide some feedback to us. So click on that link on your phones, click on that link, provide some feedbacks. We'll share with our presenters as well feedback that might be helpful for their continued work. It helps guide us into the future as well as we're looking at future webinars. We need your guidance on what those topic areas are that we should be collectively talking about. And here's Veronica's contact information. Feel free to reach out to her directly or to me with my email address, first initial, last name, at any time, so we can be able to support you in the work that you're doing. Thanks, everyone. Look forward to seeing you at the annual meeting. Bye-bye.